Howdy ho, and welcome to Drone Ground School, Week 3. Hope you're all doing well and not totally confused yet. This week we throw a bunch more at you. And for most folks, this tends to be the most confusing week of any week we have, simply because it involves reading maps. And so because of that tendency for it to be rather confusing, we are going to touch on maps multiple weeks now, between now and the end of the class, just to get you more and more comfortable. So if you're not 100% comfortable with the map after just this 1 week, don't fear, don't worry. We will be hitting on it multiple times. But anyway, this week's official title is Airspace Classification, Operating Requirements, Flight Restrictions, and Sectional Charts. Quite a tongueful. One side note, there's a couple of terms you're going to see repeated over and over, and just to be sure everybody's on the same note, when we talk about height above ground in the air, it's important that we distinguish between AGL, which is above ground level, and MSL, which is mean sea level. So mean sea level basically means it's from the average height of the ocean up. And so here in Sioux City, we are at 1,135 feet MSL at the ground, where our ground is that high above sea level. Don't think we have to worry about flooding from global warming here, but anyway, that's our MSL. If we were to have a drone flying 100 feet AGL above our actual ground level right here in Sioux City, our MSL would read 1,235. Pretty big difference in height. You can imagine if you're coming into to land somewhere and they say, hey, you're 200 feet. Is that 200 feet MSL or AGL? Going to make quite a difference. Second set of terms we need to be thinking about and aware of is IFR versus VFR. IFR is instrument flight rules. VFR is visual flight rules. Really, this is talking about how you fly the aircraft. IFR means you're using instruments such as an altimeter, you're using a speedometer, you're using all that fun stuff you see in the airplane pilot cockpits. VFR means we're using our two eyes to visually look around and assess. As a drone pilot, you are not allowed to fly IFR. You must always have visual contact and fly visually. So, as we get talking about some of those airspace classifications, it's important to distinguish here because some airspaces are only IFR, some are VFR only, and some are combination. So it's important to remember the distinction between those two acronyms. All right, let's talk about airspace. We have two types of airspace in our world. They are regulated and non-regulated. Now, non-regulated, it's just like it sounds. It means nobody's in control. You can do whatever you want. That would be like over the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Once you get out beyond the reach of the countries, you literally can do anything you want because it's international water. It's non-regulated. So within our regulated areas, we have two types of regulated airspace. We have controlled and non-controlled. Now the distinction between these two is controlled has an air traffic controller who's saying turn right, turn left, ascend to 1,000 feet, descend to 500 feet. Non-controlled means there's still someone watching over, but they're not telling you where to turn, how to turn. Additionally, as a drone pilot, if it's a controlled airspace, I may most likely need to get approval to enter that space because, again, somebody's telling everyone how to fly to make sure that they're not crashing into each other. Where non-controlled, I can go do whatever I want. How do they come up with these airspaces? Well, basically, controlled versus non-controlled. Controlled basically is dictated by complexity. How many aircraft do they expect to fly in a given area on a given day at a given time? The more aircraft, the more control that's required, the higher the letter that gives that airspace. So let's just dig right into the controlled airspaces and let's find out what they're all about. Class B airspace, you'll find this around your busiest airports like Chicago, O'Hare, Chicago Midway. Think of New York, think of Dallas, Fort Worth, those really big airports. They are typically from the surface to 10,000 feet MSL, mean sea level. The configuration, while we typically show it as an upside down birthday cake, like you see here, or a wedding cake, they're very non-standard. I can't tell you that the bottom ring is 5 miles and over here it's 10 miles. It's non-standard. It really depends on where you're at. And if you get a chance to look at the maps around Chicago, you'll notice that Midway and O'Hare, because they're so close to each other, they got some really funky shaped Class B airspaces there because of the two airports butting so close. So they're very non-standard. It's really based on what the airport needs. Then most people come in over the water, and so you don't really have to worry about it on the backside of the airport. Or it's very non-standard. You do have to have authorization to enter these areas, and good luck, because they're very, very busy, and they can be challenging to get approval sometimes because there's so much traffic. And as a drone pilot, we typically are what you would call low man on the totem pole as far as priority in these areas. Class C airspace. This is also a controlled airspace around airports, but this is other airports with control towers that also have radar approach, some sort of passenger deplanement, and IFR rules. It means you have to use instruments to land and take off at the airport. This would be Sioux City, Sioux Falls, Omaha. These would all be Class C. They're not as busy or as big. They tend to only have maybe 2 layers at most as far as the upside down cake. And their actual range of control is only up to 4,000 feet. So you can see with Class B it was up to 10,000. Here we've only got control up to 4,000, and so those large airliners flying between Minneapolis and Dallas can fly right over top of us and you don't have to bother with us at all. What is interesting on these Class C airports, however, is the inner circle. That circle that touches the ground of their airspace control is a standard 5 nautical miles. So standard 5 miles every direction from the airport. And so we can tell you assuredly that in Sioux City, as long as you're outside of that 5 mile radius, you can fly your drone. The upper pie, if I can use that, extends out to 10 miles. So the idea is the airplane is coming down through the outer pie, and by the time he's getting ready to land, hopefully he's halfway as close to the airport. Authorization is still required to get into Class C airspace as long as having instrument flight rules in effect. So as a drone pilot, you have to be extremely careful because most of the airplanes coming into land, they're not looking out their window. They are looking at the instruments in front of you, and so if you're flying your drone around, they're not going to see it because they're looking at their instruments trying to fly that way. So it makes it a little challenging sometimes because they're not seeing us. Class D airspace, again, airports with control towers, but they don't have instrument requirement. You can fly in VFR, so this would be a lot of your smaller airports. Here the control is only surface to 2,500 feet MSL. Just like Class B, it's individually tailored as far as how big a radius that control extends. Typically it is 5 nautical miles, but as in the case of here in Sioux City, our secondary airports, because they're so close to SUX, S-U-X, Sioux City Gateway Airport, or whatever they call it, because those other airports are so close, they've actually got a smaller radius that they work with because of that. Just like with B and C, you need authorization to enter Class D. There's no question about it. You have to get approval no matter where you're at. Class E airspace, again, it's controlled. This is really the items that fit in the other category. So you've got some control, but they're not really over a major airport. This is where a lot of our airplanes are flying. This is actually most of the airspace over the U.S. It always begins at 14,500 feet mean sea level. So it's up above even Class B airspace, typically. And it extends upward to 18,000 feet mean sea level. 18,000 and above, we'll talk in a minute, is Class A. What's unique about Class E is this. Airports found within do not have a tower. So this would be like Martin Airfield in South Sioux City. It's a small private airport. There's no tower. They are a Class E airspace. What's interesting is Federal Airways are found in this particular location. And what Federal Airways are is these are the routes that your small single-engine plane will take to fly between airports. And so these are established routes that really help to guide us as we might fly our small airplanes around. And it also allows us to stay out of the way of the big commercial jets. by following these routes. And so that's really what those federal airways are all about, is helping us to stay safe when you got those big jumbos flying around above us. Class E airspace does not require authorization. This is unique. For all of our controlled airspaces, Class E is the only one that does not require authorization to enter as a drone pilot. I got this question on the test, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of you didn't get this on the test as well. Beyond Class E airspace, we have uncontrolled Class G airspace. And Class G airspace, you might say, is other. It's everything below 18,000 feet that doesn't fit in another category. With Class G airspace, this is out over areas that there's nothing there. You can do anything. There is no authorization required. As far as a drone pilot, you really don't have to worry about these areas at all. Just watching out for other aircraft is all you're really asked to do. Last uncontrolled, we have Class A. Class A is 18,000 feet mean sea level and above. As far as a drone pilot's concerned, we can't fly that high. A, it's not legal. B, a 200 mile an hour headwind. Our drones can't handle 20 mile an hour, let alone 200 mile an hour. So we're really not going to fly that high. And so for the test, really all you need to know is it is a type of airspace that requires IFR, and it's above 18,000 MSL. That's really all you need to know.